Testing, testing. Sounds better to me. Okay. All right, I'm getting thumbs up. So we'll go ahead and get started. So let me call this meeting to order. This is the August 2022 meeting of the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council. We are meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and today's meeting is a joint meeting with the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission's Bluefish Management Board. We have done this many times in the past where we meet jointly for both the council and the board. And so I'd like to welcome Joe Cimino, who represents New Jersey as a council member, but also serves the commission as the Bluefish Board Chair today. Joe, did you have anything to say to welcome anybody?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. We're looking forward to getting through this with council and commission staff. We have Dustin and Tony with us who will be helping me, especially as we move on to our own section, but I appreciate the welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So we are dealing, I'm personally sitting in this spot. I don't know where I sit in the room. I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing, just so if you can try to speak up into the microphone, I think that's going to be helpful. And we'll do the best that we can working through the audio issue, hopefully before we adjourn this afternoon, but definitely by tomorrow if it doesn't get better. So again, welcome everyone. It's really nice to see everybody. I know I missed the last meeting. I was very under the weather with COVID, and so I really missed seeing all of you at the last meeting in New York, but glad to be here in Philadelphia to kick off this meeting today. So as we have in the past when we meet jointly, we are going to go back and forth if votes are necessary, with council starting off the first vote. The board will take a second vote, and we'll switch back and forth throughout the afternoon. I don't expect there to be a lot of motions before us today, but if we do have to deal with that, Joe and I will work back and forth to make sure everybody's accounted for. Because we are meeting today, not just jointly as a council and the commission's board, but we're also, this is a hybrid style meeting, so we have a number of people here, both council members and board members who are in the room with us. And then we also have a number of participants who are participating online. So the way we've handled that in the past, and it seems to work pretty well, is for those of you who have a computer in front of you or some way of accessing the meeting digitally, what I'd like to do is I'm going to focus, as I chair this meeting, I'm going to focus on the hands that are raised on the screen. So even if you're in the room and you'd like to offer some comment or have questions for staff, if you can raise your hand online, I will exhaust that list. And from time to time, if your hand goes up, I'll certainly call on you if you're in the room, but I'd like to try to manage the amount of comments and questions we have using the online portal for the presentation and discussion. With that said, today's first item on the agenda is a discussion regarding the Bluefish 2023 specifications. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Carson with council staff and Dustin with the boards, with the commission staff. They're going to be here to provide us with a presentation, and then we'll take up any actions if necessary. So Carson, if you're ready, we can go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this volume okay down there? Try to get it closer. Is that better? Okay. Great. So as Mike mentioned, I'm here with Dustin Colson-Leaning, and I've been with Bluefish just starting this year. So I'm excited to be here and kick off the meeting. Next slide, please. Thanks. So this slide shows the meeting outline and the meeting objectives. So first, I'm going to give an overview of the stock status and present the Science Center data update. And then I'll discuss the recent fishery catch and harvest and review the AP fishery performance report. And then I'll give an overview of the SSC and monitoring committee recommendations. And after that, I'll review the AP comments from their August meeting on recreational measures. And then the meeting objective today is for the council and board to review the previously implemented 2023 Bluefish specifications. And at this meeting, that includes recreational management measures. And rec measures are being considered in August this year, kind of consistent with previous years before the new MRIP data was released. And this is because when measures are set in December for Bluefish, it's difficult for all the states and the federal rulemaking to get measures in place for the fishing year that they're intended for. Next slide, please. All right, so getting into Bluefish stock status, the most recent stock assessment was in 2021. So this group has already seen that information, and it included data through 2019. And the results of that assessment were that the stock is overfished. However, overfishing is not occurring. And then there's also an ongoing Bluefish research track assessment, and that's scheduled for peer review in late 2022. So that's scheduled for December. And then those results will be available next year, and they'll be used to inform a management track assessment that will be used for 2024 and 2025 specifications. It worked. All right, so this graph is from the most recent assessment, and it shows the Bluefish spawning stock biomass in the solid black line, and then recruitment in the gray vertical bars. And then the lower horizontal dashed line is the biomass threshold. And because the biomass is below the threshold, the stock is considered overfished in 2019. And this graph is also from that 2021 management track assessment. And it shows total catch in gray bars, which are further broken down by landings and discards. And fishing mortality is shown by the black line. Because fishing mortality is below the F threshold, overfishing was not occurring in 2019. And then this year, the new information that we have is the 2022 data update for Bluefish from the Science Center. So this included an update to the recreational CPUE index through 2021, and that showed a slight increase from the 2020 estimate. And this is shown in the top graph on the slide. And then the lower graph is the 2021 Science Center Fall Index, which increased in 2021 compared with the 2019 value, which was the lowest in the time series. And this index was not available for 2020 because the survey did not occur in that year. And then the data update also provided us with landings and discards estimates for 2020 and 2021, shown in this table. And then as outlined in the staff rec memos for this meeting, there are currently two methods used to estimate recreational bluefish dead discards. A GARFO methodology used for catch accounting and a Science Center methodology used in the assessment. And the Science Center approach, which is shown on the slide, estimates higher discards than the GARFO approach in recent years. And this is expected to be the last year that there's two different estimates produced, because once the research track assessment results are available, those discards will be used for both the assessment and the rest of the management process moving forward. And then these discard estimates are very different from each other. For example, the 2021 Science Center discards shown on the screen are 12.6 million pounds, and then the 2021 recreational dead discards using the GARFO method was 6.64 million pounds, so just about half. And then this table shows the management measures in recent years compared with recent harvest. And in recent years, the commercial fishery has not fully landed their quota. In 2021, they landed around 500,000 pounds under their quota. And those quota and landings for 2021 are highlighted in green. And then the recreational fishery, which is highlighted in yellow, landed 12.46 million pounds in 2021, about 4 million pounds over the RHL. And in 2021, there was an RHL and a recreational ACL overage that will require a pound-for-pound payback in 2023 due to the bluefish accountability measures when the stock is overfished. So we'll talk about that in more detail under the monitoring committee discussion. And then from partway through 2020 to 2022, the recreational possession limit has been 3 fish for the private sector and a 5 fish possession limit for the for-hire sector. And then GARFO discard estimates were used for total catch estimation in this table, and that's for consistency with the discards used to set those measures. So this graph shows bluefish catch from 2000 to 2021, and bluefish is a predominantly recreational fishery. So the rec fishery is shown by the lighter blue, which is recreational harvest, and then gray, which is recreational dead discards. And then the top dark blue layer shows the commercial landings. And commercial discards are assumed to be negligible. And again, recreational dead discards here are using the GARFO methodology. So over the past 10 years, catch has been trending downwards overall, and the catch estimate was 21.27 million pounds in 2021. So just transitioning to the recreational fishery, this table shows the 2021 recreational harvest by state. And these are shown in pounds and numbers of fish, and then an average weight per fish. The top 3 states in terms of landings are outlined with the green boxes. So New Jersey and Florida landed over 3 million pounds, and New York harvested over 2 million pounds. And then these are the values of recreational harvest by mode since 1991. And if you look at 2020 to 2021, for hire and private rental harvest increased slightly, while shore mode harvest decreased. And for hire harvest has remained similar since 2018. And not shown on this graph, about 97% of bluefish harvest by weight occurs in state waters in 2021. So transitioning over to the commercial fishery, in 2021, according to dealer data, 248 commercial vessels landed bluefish and 119 federally permitted dealers purchased bluefish. And this graph shows bluefish commercial landings in millions of pounds in orange, and then ex-vessel value in blue, and adjusted price per pound in gray. So in 2021, landings slightly decreased compared with 2020, and ex-vessel value and price per pound increased. And then this graph is from the GARFO quota monitoring website, and it shows the current year in blue, and then last year in the dotted line. And so commercial fishery landings in 2022 have been tracking behind 2021 landings from May through early August, but they are following a similar trend. Moving on to landings by port, this table shows the top ports of bluefish landings in pounds, and this is based on dealer data. And the top ports here means anything over 100,000 pounds, so this does not include all landings or all ports. And then the column furthest to the right shows the number of vessels that landed those bluefish for each port. So next I'll provide an overview of the AP Fishery Performance Report, and that was included in the briefing materials. So the Bluefish AP met via webinar in June to develop this report, and 9 advisors provided comments at the meeting, and then 1 provided comments via email. So the first broad category that advisors talked about was environmental factors and general catch trends. So multiple advisors noted that catch has been relatively flat since the drop-off after 2017. And 1 advisor added that anglers from shore and beaches don't keep a lot of bluefish. They're releasing them. And they noted that last November, there were quite a few bluefish, and those fish were about 3 to 5 pounds. Another advisor said that that bluefish move inshore, the ones that move inshore are spillover from the population that are looking for additional forage. And then in New Jersey, an advisor said that bluefish showed up late this year, possibly due to a late menhaden timing. And an advisor said that for the for-hire sector in New Jersey, fishing out of Point Pleasant, bluefish is not a catch and release fishery. And in this area, they saw plenty of bluefish last year, while this year the bluefish came in a little late. Fall bluefish fishing has been pretty good, and most boats switch to striped bass at this time, while bluefish becomes more of a secondary target. And an advisor in Rhode Island said that the commercial and recreational fishing started out strong last year and then it fell off on the latter half of the year, especially for gill netting. They added that giant bluefin tuna moved inshore in the fall and scared off the smaller bluefish, which could have impacted those landings. And then this year, bluefish seems like a strong stock and people are reaching their quotas quickly. In Maine, an advisor said that bluefish were historically important for the for hire trips, especially in August when other species close. And then as the population has decreased, there have been very few bluefish in Maine and New Hampshire for the past 5 years. And in Massachusetts, there have been more bluefish in the fall last year, especially the south side of the Cape. So a bluefish dealer and smokehouse owner who purchases bluefish up and down the coast had several comments. They said that they used to see bigger fish prior to 2018 coastwide, but now they're much smaller, except for this year, they started seeing really big fish again. And they commented that an environmental shift has likely caused big bluefish to move offshore. And then similar to an earlier comment, they discussed that last year in Rhode Island, when the tuna moved in close, it affected the inshore gill netters and there were less fish caught. And they added that it has been a while since something like that had occurred. And then they added that those fishing 10 to 11 miles south of Block Island were catching a lot and were only restricted by the quota. And they added that in the fall, bluefish were coming by Rhode Island, but offshore. And then an advisor in the Delaware and Maryland area commented that they aren't seeing tiny snappers or jumbos, but a good supply of fish around 28 inches. And they noted that bluefish have been in the surf and going into estuaries, which is providing people with new fishing opportunities. One advisor commented that Connecticut's average weight for bluefish seems difficult to believe, saying that it was too small. However, other advisors commented that the snapper fishery is popular in Connecticut and the high number of snappers can explain the low average weight per fish. And then advisors also discussed management and economic issues. So one advisor commented that the discard mortality rate of 15% seems high, but they added that treble hooks make it harder to release the fish, so choosing to fish with a single hook may increase survival. And another advisor commented that they'd heard that anglers are upset about Florida's minimum size limit. However, there were no Florida AP members present to comment on this. And then another advisor asked about the implications of the 2021 RHL overage. And this meeting was in June, so we didn't have either discard estimate yet, but staff discussed that the monitoring committee and council and board would consider that when setting 2023 recreational measures. And then 5 AP members supported an increase in bag limit for the for-hire sector, and 4 specified that this could be supported with an implementation of a minimum size just for the for-hire mode. One advisor did not support different bag limits across modes and said that this was not fair or equitable. One advisor discussed the benefits of sector separation in the Gulf of Mexico between the private and for-hire modes. And then 2 advisors supported investigating a small but reasonable minimum size to help protect the stock. And then one advisor said that regulations don't have a big impact on angler behavior or the health of the stock due to it being a majority catch and release fishery. And then advisors also discussed research priorities. One felt that more research is needed on the release mortality, and single hook lures should be promoted along with a circle hook requirement. And they also, another advisor added that research is needed on the large scale cyclical nature of bluefish. And then lastly, research should be done on the impact of the snapper fishery on the stock and what is the impact of removing these small bluefish from the future population. And then one advisor provided email comments after the meeting. They noted that as a 6-pack charter boat operator, the current bag limit is completely fine, and they catch a ton of bluefish and release about 90%. They noted that when there's small bait fish, such as sand eels and silversides, you find plenty of smaller bluefish. And then when menhaden are around, you find the larger or alligator bluefish. So we've covered all the updates regarding 2021 fishery performance, and I'll move into the SSC's recommendation at their July meeting of this year. So the SSC recommended maintaining the previously implemented ABC, which was 30.62 million pounds or 13,890 metric tons. And the SSC at their meeting generally discussed that we're in the second year of the rebuilding plan and the upcoming research track assessment. They were looking forward to those results. And they concluded that this year, there's no new information to suggest a change is needed from the currently implemented ABC. So this is a flow chart, just as a reminder. And it's a simplified version of how the harvest limits are set for the recreational and commercial fishery for bluefish. So the transfer step is not shown in there for this year since they are not allowed when the stock is overfished. And as a reminder, these specifications were set last year for 2022 and 23. So in this review year, the monitoring committee, council, and board can look at the measures that were already put in place and see if there's new information that warrants changes. Starting from the top, the SSC receives information from the most recent stock assessment and sets the OFL and ABC. The ABC accounts for scientific uncertainty in the OFL, and then the ABC is divided into recreational and commercial ACLs, and that's the catch limit for each sector. So that's based on the percent allocation to each sector. Then the monitoring committee discusses management uncertainty and can put into place a buffer between the ACL and the ACT so that the ACT is the annual catch target. And from that target, expected discards are subtracted to derive the RHL. And in this case, the recreational pound for pound payback is also subtracted in order to adjust the RHL. So given that there's no recommended change to the ABC, there would not be a need to change the ACLs, which just divide the ABC by sector percentages. And then the monitoring committee discussed that there are some uncertainties related to the quantity of commercial discards, which is currently assumed to be negligible. However, they also noted that there were no recent commercial quota overages and ultimately did not feel that an uncertainty buffer was needed for the commercial ACT. In addition, no changes were recommended to the commercial quota. The monitoring committee had a lengthy conversation and discussion about the recreational fishery. So I'll go over the main points and then the recommendations. So one major point of discussion was the management uncertainty in the recreational sector. And a lot of this uncertainty is from those two different discard estimates. And then also the fact that in recent years, we have not been able to constrain catch to the catch limits. For the discard estimates, they discussed that the GARFO estimate being used to set RHLs and evaluate overages may be an underestimate of discards, though not all monitoring committee members were in full agreement. And then while the Science Center methodology may be an overestimate of discards. And then the monitoring committee also discussed that there's some level of non-compliance. For example, based on MRIP data, anglers have kept numbers of fish over the bag limit, up to 15 fish in 2021. And they discussed that the actual levels of harvest that occurs from non-compliance needs to be further evaluated. And there may need to be more outreach on the current regulations. The monitoring committee did note that bag limit non-compliance is captured in the MRIP harvest estimates. So it is part of the overall understanding of harvest, which can reduce the uncertainty for that specific factor. And then lastly, there were concerns that the most recent assessment used data through 2019, and now we're projecting out to 2023 based on that data. So there's more uncertainty this year than in previous years. Okay, I think it switched. The monitoring committee discussed at length the potential for adding an uncertainty buffer to the 2023 recreational ACL to derive a more precautionary ACT based on the concerns from the last slide. Some buffers discussed were adding 10% of the GARFO discard estimates as a buffer, or another approach was using recent RHL overage percentages to quantify management uncertainty. Discards and the payback would then be subtracted from that lowered ACT. Many monitoring committee members supported the idea of an uncertainty buffer given the management concerns, but some did not feel comfortable with adding a buffer that lowers the catch target and RHL without a clear way to quantify and justify the buffer. Ultimately, the group as a whole did not decide to add this buffer due to the lack of agreed upon calculation as a basis, but they did support a future meeting to discuss uncertainty estimation approaches to be used in the future. And because there was no uncertainty buffer added, the recreational ACT was set equal to the recreational ACL. So there's no recommended changes from the previously implemented ACLs and ACTs for 2023. So moving on through that flow chart, the monitoring committee then discussed the 2023 RHL, which is calculated from that ACT. And as mentioned before, the official dead discard estimate from GARFO for 2021 is 6.64 million pounds, and that's in the second row of the table. So landings and discards in 2021 resulted in that recreational ACL overage. The bottom row shows the overage amount, and thus accountability measures are triggered for 2023. So for Bluefish, due to its overfish status, this is a pound-for-pound payback of 5.59 million pounds to be applied to 2023. So moving on from the table to that last bullet, the 2023 RHL would be derived by subtracting the payback and expected discards from the ACT. And then options for expected discards to be used for 2023 could be the 2021 GARFO discards or the 2021 Science Center discards. So I'll get into those RHL calculations on the next slide. So this table from the rec memo shows the payback adjusted 2023 RHLs that use either 2021 GARFO or 2021 Science Center discards as a proxy for 2023 discards. And as you can see, looking at the bottom two rows, there's approximately a 6 million pound difference between the two RHLs due to that difference in discard estimate. The expected harvest and the two RHLs in the table would result in either a 35% reduction needed or a 13% liberalization allowed in 2023. And that's compared to 2021 harvest. The monitoring committee agreed that 2021 harvest would be the best proxy for 2023 harvest because in 2020, the bag limit reduction did not occur until mid-year. And in addition, some of 2020 data were imputed using 2018 and 19, which were both years where there was a 15 fish bag limit. So the 2020 data may not reflect a harvest estimate that takes into consideration that smaller bag limit. And then the monitoring committee ultimately recommended using the adjusted RHL of 14.11 million pounds. And that's using the GARFO discards, which is consistent with how the measures were initially set for 2023. So with that RHL recommendation, I'll transition into discussion of recreational measures. And then as described in the rec memo and earlier in this presentation, in December of last year, the council and board requested that the impacts of increasing the for-hire sector bag limit from a 5-fish limit to a 7-fish bag limit be analyzed. So staff calculated 3 sets of % difference in harvest relative to status quo measures using 3 different methodologies that are presented in Table 5 of the rec memo. But across these 3 methods, using the 2021 MRIP data, increasing the bag limit from 5 fish to 7 fish for the for-hire sector would yield a 0.2% to 0.39% increase to overall expected recreational harvest. Then one caveat to this is that we only have 1 year of MRIP data under the current measures to base these impacts on. So with that, I'll move into the monitoring committee recommendations on rec measures. The monitoring committee recommended status quo recreational measures for 2023. As I mentioned earlier, they had a lengthy discussion of the management uncertainty in the rec sector. They noted that the difference between the 2 discard estimates for 2021 would result in very different RHLs. And although the GARFO methodology was recommended to be used for 2023 for consistency with the estimates used to set measures and evaluate ACLs, this method may be an underestimate of dead discards. Status quo recreational measures are one way to factor in this big discrepancy. And then multiple monitoring committee members noted that in one more year, the research track assessment is expected to help resolve this issue of two different estimates, so status quo measures can hold us over until then. Several monitoring committee members also discussed the benefits of stability in measures. So changing rec measures from year to year makes it difficult to evaluate the effectiveness of those measures, may decrease compliance. And then additionally, that research track assessment is expected to provide a better understanding of the stock, and managers will have that information next year to consider for the following years. So no monitoring committee members supported liberalizations specific to 2023, given the uncertainties and recent overages. One monitoring committee member discussed the different bag limits by sector that acknowledged the needs of the different sectors, but also noted the frustration of some in the private angler sector who are not happy with the current measures being split by sector within the recreational fishery. Monitoring committee members discussed that currently a recreational sector separation amendment is under consideration as part of the recreational reform initiative by the council and board. So this action can more thoroughly evaluate challenges related to these different stakeholder groups and develop a more formal approach for divergent measures by sector within the recreational fishery. So with that, here's a table summarizing all of the monitoring committee recommendations from ACTs down to recreational measures. The monitoring committee recommendations are on the right-hand side, and the original measures being reviewed are shown on the left. So the numbers in bold are the changes that are either required because of that payback or recommended be incorporated. And the required, all the measures are in millions of pounds. So after the monitoring committee meeting, the AP met again in August, on August 1st, after reviewing these recommendations from the different groups, and they commented on the 2023 recreational management measures. So at this meeting, 4 AP members supported status quo recreational measures in 2023, and they brought up similar concerns as the monitoring committee, including stability, the recent overages, and the uncertainty in the discard estimates, as well as the upcoming research track assessment and the need to respond to that when it comes. 2 AP members felt that if there was any liberalization considered by the council and board, this change should bring the private and for-hire bag limits equal, not further apart. An AP member added that the resources in rebuilding and the for-hire sector may be a small component, but that doesn't justify a conservation pass or unequal bag limits. And further divergence by mode should be explored through the sector separation amendments. And then an AP member asked about the percent of for-hire trips that landed the full bag limit and whether the number of trips has increased in recent years. And staff did not have that analysis on hand at the meeting, but followed up. And the number of trips from 2017 to 2021 is in a backup slide for this presentation. And they did fluctuate. And then 5% of for-hire trips that harvested bluefish landed the full 5-fish bag limit in 2021. And then an AP member asked about non-compliance and what the level of non-compliance looked like. And staff noted that that anglers did keep up to 15 bluefish on trips in 2021, but more work needs to be done to quantify the levels of non-compliance in this fishery and over time. And then another AP member commented that different states, modes, and regions have different management needs, and regulations in one region shouldn't take away from business in another region. So that's all I have, and as a reminder, the decision point today is for the council and board to recommend any changes warranted to the previously recommended limits and measures. And so I'll leave this slide up with the monitoring committee recommendations for the discussion as needed.
Okay, Carson, thank you very much for the presentation. I was going to ask you to do just that, put up that slide, which shows the 2023 adjusted values due to the payback that's required. Before we take up any motions, are there any questions by any members of the council or the board at this time? Nicola?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Carson, for the great presentation. We're lucky to have you on Bluefish. I just wanted to make sure that I had the right understanding of the statement that moving forward after the research track assessment, there's just going to be one estimate of discards. And my understanding is that means that whatever is used in the research track assessment supported by peer review, that method will be used, taken up by GARFO when they do their ACL evaluations each year. You're nodding your head yes. So that comes with the understanding that that method, they'll be able to produce that on an annual basis for ACL evaluations as well.
That's my understanding, yes, when talking with GARFO staff, but might look to them for further confirmation.
Thank you. One more question, if I may, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. In discussing when the monitoring committee was discussing non-compliance with the recreational measures, you gave the 5%, well, non-compliance, right? Did they discuss whether non-compliance with the bag limit was more prevalent in any one particular sector, or was that kind of just a general statement about non-compliance?
It was a general statement about non-compliance. Both sectors did have trips that were over the 3 or 5 fish bag limit for 2021, but we definitely need to do a deeper dive to get a better handle on it.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. And Nicola, that was the same question that I had too about the assessment. So if there is anyone that may be able to speak to that, if you want to raise your hand online, the folks from the Science Center may be able to say something regarding that. That would be helpful. Let me look and see who we have next. Michelle Duvall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just, I guess, a comment and a question. So I definitely appreciated the discussion that the monitoring committee had about management uncertainty and maybe some of the challenges in addressing that, but was glad to see that a potential solution put forward with respect to having a dedicated meeting to that. So I guess, my comment would be that I think given some of the discussions we're going to have tomorrow, that might be, it might be a good thing for members of the Summer Flounder Scup Black Sea Bass Monitoring Committee to kind of sit in on those discussions. I mean, it would be good to have sort of a comprehensive approach to, discussing management uncertainty, whether it's for the recreational sector or the commercial sector. Understandably, we have better control over not overshooting quotas in the commercial sector, where our uncertainty is obviously the discard. So, just a comment. But then I guess with respect to different bag limits for the different recreational modes, I thought I heard maybe it was at the ASMFC May meeting, Tony, that the commission is doing some work on looking at mode splits, and just wondering if that might be some useful information that could be part of this discussion of sector separation.
Tony?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That group is working, but it's not the fastest moving group, I would say. So as we pull together information, present it to the commission, and they make some decisions about how we approach mode splits and if we want to or not want to allow them in different fisheries, we can share the findings of the group with the council and council staff and decide what information might be helpful for this body to reflect upon or not. But we're more than happy to provide that information as it goes. But I don't make any promises on timeline of when they will complete their work.
Sorry, Tony, I missed that last part.
I don't make promises on the timeline of when they will complete their work, because I don't think they've gotten back together since May. So
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next, I'm going to go to Jason McNamee. Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a, I think, pretty quick question. One of the things that is helping right now, we have accountability measures and things that are kicking in, and they're not as bad as they could be because the RHL is going up over the next couple of years. And so I was wondering what was driving that. I'm assuming it's largely driven by the recruitment assumption that's going into the projections, just to get the whole kind of question out and then give you time to answer. And so I was looking in the memo, it's figure 2 in the July 2nd memo. In general, I think we're using, in the case of Bluefish, kind of a average recruitment assumption is what's being used in the projections. And so I'm wondering if that's a fair assumption in the case of Bluefish. And it looks like it might be that we're kind of like, it's up and down year to year, but generally around average. There's this really faint line on that figure, which I am guessing was the average recruitment. It's not labeled on there, but that was my guess as to what that really faint line is on there. So I'm just wondering, is my assumption of what's going on there correct? And if so, is average recruitment a fair assumption in the case of Bluefish?
This is Dustin. I can take this question or help Carson, as she is also just a few months into Bluefish. So I don't believe she was there during the presentation Tony Wood gave. I can't speak to that faint line. I would have to ask for Tony Wood, but I do know that recruitment is considered stochastic, meaning it's fairly random and there isn't a strong relationship understood between SSB and recruitment. So I think it's just like an average over a time period. And so with the constant fishing mortality approach to the rebuilding plan, SSB rebuilds we're in the projection years now, and as such, catch would allow to increase as well. I hope that helps answer. But I guess I would also note that Tony Wood, the lead stock assessment scientist, had said to be cautious about trusting the further out projection years too much. And so that's also been a word of caution, especially as we look at the research track assessment coming up. And so it might be better to just take that into consideration when we're far out in those projection years about what SSB actually is.
And I'll just add, looking at that figure, I think that faint line is just kind of a guideline every 50,000 metric tons. So I don't think it's an average line.
Okay, thank you for that. David Stormer, online. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the presentation, Carson. I'd just like to maybe get a little clarification on the use of the Garfo dead discards estimate. I think I remember that the Garfo estimate of dead discards uses the average size of harvested fish. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, okay, thanks. I read, I think on page 27 of the combined briefing materials that I think it's the fishery performance report. There's a statement in there that threw me a little bit. It reads, the bluefish recreational fishery is unusual because it's almost exclusively catch and release, except for those fishing for snappers. I'm not sure I completely agree with this statement, but and it was not a comment. I think it was sort of in the text. But particularly given the average weight per fish that Carson of harvested fish that Carson presented earlier. But if this is the case, I'm just wondering how this statement squares with using a release mortality or dead discard mortality estimate in pounds of harvested fish. If released fish are larger than the harvested fish, as I presume the statement indicates. So, I mean, in other words, is the average size of harvested fish an appropriate reflection of release mortality?
Carson?
That's a great question that a lot of people have thought about and had different opinions on. But the the Science Center methodology does incorporate the lengths of a length-weight relationship on discarded fish. So it does account for the size of a discarded fish. However, it doesn't capture, it currently did not capture the full geographic range of bluefish. So they were missing some volunteer samples from the southern states. So there's kind of been issues with both methods for different reasons, but they are incorporating new data inputs into the new research track assessment, including more length information.
Okay, thanks, Carson. Are there any other questions? Members of the
Miss-
council?
Mr. Chair, this is John Hare. I can't figure out how to raise my hand, but, just to go back to that question, that is a specific question that's being looked at in the research track assessment regarding the two discard methodologies. So we should have more information on that when the research track assessment is concluded.
All right, thanks, John. Yeah, if you're having a hard time raising your hand as you did, just go ahead and speak up and we'll make sure you get your point across. Are there any other questions for Carson before we take up the actions to consider? Okay, seeing no hands online and seeing no hands in the room, Carson, I believe the first thing we'd like to do, and I'll check with Joe to make sure he's okay with this, but I'd like to consider the revision that was presented to us on the 2023 specifications based on the overage that we needed. So we'll take that question up first, and then we can have a discussion regarding the measures which were discussed of increasing the for-hire bag limit to 7 fish and the analysis that was completed. So starting with specifications, I think there was a motion prepared by staff. Was there anything, Carson, for that?
Yeah, just waiting for it to show up on the screen.
Okay. Okay, so this motion, so the motion in front of us now is one that was reflected in the table that was presented, which it makes revisions to the specifications based on the overage and the payback, the ACL overage and the payback. So as we do for joint meetings with the board and the council, we're going to need a like motion from both bodies before moving forward. So I'd ask if there's any member of the council that would like to make this motion. Any council member interested in making the motion in front of us? Michelle Duval? Is there a second on behalf of the council? Kate Wilkie, second the motion on behalf of the council. I'll look to members of the board. It looks like I've got John Maniscalco online making that motion and seconded by Nicola Meserve. Okay, so we have a motion to discuss. Joe, if it's okay with you, I think I'll just go with the makers and ask for any, Michelle, would you like to speak to the motion, a rationale behind the motion?
Sure. I mean, I think, staff laid it out quite well that, this revision is necessary due to the pound for pound payback that's required as a result of our accountability measures and the 2021 overage. So I think it's pretty straightforward. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. And John, did you have anything you'd like to add for rationale for the motion? John Maniscalco, you're still on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only thing I would add is that I support the use of the GARFO discard methodology, at least for this year. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay, so we have a motion before us. Are there any discussion of the motion? Chris Batsavage?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I could support this motion. I listened to the monitoring committee meeting as well, and I appreciate their pretty thorough discussion about how to handle management uncertainty. Certainly management uncertainty exists with this fishery as well as some others, but was encouraged to hear that they plan on discussing in more detail how to address management uncertainty in some formal way next year, and certainly support that meeting going forward. So when we have issues of management uncertainty in the future, that the monitoring committee has a way to do it as opposed to just kind of just arbitrarily picking some sort of reduction. So I think with that, I could support this motion. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Adam Nowalski?
Thank you very much. I will support the motion as well. I also support the GARFO approach. I just also want to make clear for the record that for those that may not be familiar with where we are, while they may be thinking, oh my gosh, this is an 8 million pound decrease in recreational harvest, this is just a change in the placeholder specs that were for 2023. This is actually still an increase in the recreational RHL from where we are now. I'll also point out that we've heard a lot of conversation both around the table and from the public in recent years asking the question about where is recreational accountability. Well, here we are, 5.59 million pounds out of a 20+ million pound RHL. That's almost 25% decrease. I hope that puts to bed the question for a long period of time about whether or not the recreational sector is being held accountable or not. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Adam. Are there any other comments, any other discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none at this time, is there any need for the board to caucus? If any board member needs an opportunity to caucus, if someone can raise their hand in the room or online, provide that opportunity for caucusing. Okay, seeing no hands being raised, I'm going to bring it back and call the question. I'm going to start with the council. I'm going to read the motion into the record since it hasn't been read yet, and then I'll ask the council to vote, and then I'll turn it over to my co-chair, Mr. Semino, to call the question of the board. So the motion is move to revise the 2023 recreational harvest limit to 14.11 million pounds for bluefish to account for the pound-for-pound payback needed from the 2021 recreational ACL overage of 5.59 million pounds and updated discards. Is the council ready? Is there any objection by any member of the council? Seeing no objections, motion carries by consent. Joe, I'm going to turn it over. I don't know how you want to handle it from the board side, but I'll leave that to you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so I appreciate you giving the board a chance to signal if they need to caucus, and we didn't see any hands. So I'll call the same question. Are there any objections from the board for this motion? Are there any abstentions? Don't see any. So thank you, Mike. So passes unanimous.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Okay, the motion passes both the council and the board, and so we have a motion that carries. The next item that I would like to open up the floor for discussion on has to do with the analysis and the request that came to staff to analyze an increase to the for-hire bag limit to 7 fish. Carson, is there any additional information you wanted to go over for that before we take up the question?
No, I can pull the information back up, but there's nothing additional.
Okay, yeah, if you need to see something that was presented, Carson can bring that up. I'll make the point that unless there's an interest to change, we don't need to do anything if we want to maintain status quo. There's no motion for status quo, but if a change is suggested, we'll need a motion for that change. And so I'll look to members of the council, members of the board, for anyone who would like to have any discussion or perhaps make a motion on this topic. Okay, I don't see any hands at this time for either comments, questions, or motions. I'll give it one more second. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close that item. And so Carson and Dustin will, with no motion needed, will maintain status quo measures for 2023. Thank you all very much. Is there anything else that needs to come before us as a joint body at this time?
Nope, not as a joint body.
Okay, so that concludes the work of the board and the council at this time. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the council. The next item on the agenda for this afternoon is a board-only item. And so if you would like to stay, you're welcome, but the council is free to go. And this should not take very long. And there's hospitality this evening. I don't know if you want to make that announcement now, Chris, on hospitality, just in case folks want to peel away. Go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council, you have two possibilities. Go to hospitality now, it's in room 230, or stick around and listen to the commission board talk about state compliance. So after the board is done, the hospitality is going to be open. So the room is 230. So hospitality will open as soon as I get there, and will be open when the board completes its business as well.
Okay, thanks, Chris. All right, I'm going to turn things over now to the chairman of the Bluefish Board, Joe Cimino, to lead us through the next item on today's afternoon agenda. Yeah, actually, let's take 5 minutes, let people settle back in or step away if they'd like, and we'll pick things up in about 5 minutes. So how about we start at 4:10? We'll get things started. Thanks, everyone.
This is a 2-minute warning for the ASMFC Bluefish Management Board. Okay, folks, welcome back. We are settling down here in the room. Hopefully, we have all our board members back virtually as well. At this time, the ASMFC board will take up the FMP review for fishing year 2021, and I'll be turning it over to Dustin Colson-Leaning. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. This will be a very short presentation on the Bluefish FMP review of the 2021 fishing year. So here we have the, and keep in mind there might be a short delay in the presentation, just bear with me. But up on the screen, we have the 8 components of the FMP review. However, Carson covered much of this already in her presentation. So instead of having you sit through me go through the information again, I'll really just skip ahead to the plan review team or PRT comments and recommendations. So here we have the FMP compliance requirements, starting with the recreational possession limit of 3 fish for the private sector and the 5 fish bag limit for the for-hire sector. There are no seasonal or minimum size regulations. However, states are always welcome to be more restrictive for the sake of conservation, and some states have implemented minimum sizes. States are also required to restrict the commercial fishery to the quota through possession limits, as many states do. And then, of course, states must monitor commercial and recreational fishery, maintain a permitting system for commercial fishermen, commercial dealers, and for-hire operators. And then we have the Addendum 1 biological sampling program, which you may remember was revised in 2021. So here we have the biological sampling program with the age samples listed by state. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, and North Carolina participate in the program, as well as Florida, which was added in 2021 with the new revised addendum. It's put in place to improve age and length data used in the stock assessment. And each state now has a requirement of collecting 100 ages, but no longer a 50 seasonal requirement. It's now a target to collect 50 samples from January through June and 50 samples through July through December. And as you can see, almost all states met this requirement of 100 samples with two exceptions. Massachusetts fell just one shy, with one sample being removed from the reported out data due to suspected mismeasurement. And then 4 samples were removed just because they were unable to be aged. And Florida also fell short with 79 samples, falling short of that 100 sample requirement. However, this was Florida's first year implementing the biological sampling program. And so there was some delays in getting the program up to speed, and the majority of the sampling took place through late spring through summer, as opposed to late fall, early spring, and winter, when actually abundance and availability of bluefish is highest. So as staff, I followed up with FWC, and it sounds like they're kind of reinventing the program for next year, putting a greater emphasis on expanding the time when they're collecting those samples, and also bringing expediency to processing the age samples so that they're ready for the annual compliance. Sorry, there's just an echo. I'm going to try again. Okay, sounds good. Let's see. And so, yeah, FWC staff indicated that they were going to emphasize improved collections in the following year. So the PRT didn't have any major concerns and wanted to be more supportive of Florida as they get their program up to speed, acknowledging that both Massachusetts and Florida made a good effort to work within the confines of the biological sampling program. And as I said, FWC has indicated that they have improvements that we've made moving forward. So otherwise, all states implemented regulations consistent with the intent of Amendment 1 and Addendum 1 of the Bluefish Interstate FMP. The plan review team did also want to note, however, that Connecticut's compliance report did indicate an overage of the commercial quota in 2021. Oddly enough, GARFO catch accounting does not. And this kind of ties back to something we've talked about in previous years where there are differences between ACC SP data warehouse data or state reported data and Safest STRS data, which kind of has federal dealer data trump state data. And so while the plan review team didn't want to flag this as a major issue, they will just continue to monitor this for significant discrepancies moving forward during the annual compliance review. So then lastly, there are de minimis requests. And as a reminder, de minimis requirement allows states to apply for de minimis status, where if they can demonstrate that commercial landings are less than 0.1% of coastwide landings, they can be granted de minimis status. Maine, South Carolina, and Georgia all requested de minimis status for 2021, and all those states meet the criteria. And I might as well note here that the policy board recently discussed de minimis status in greater detail, and so moving forward, there may be more of an emphasis on standardizing de minimis status in the future, potentially moving that threshold up to 1% or some other value, as well as better defining what exactly de minimis status achieves and breaking it down by recreational versus commercial sector, or having it combined for both fisheries. So with that, that's my presentation. I'll just close here with the plan review team recommendation that the board approve the FMP review, state compliance reports, and de minimis requests from Maine, South Carolina, and Georgia's commercial fisheries. And I have a draft motion prepared if anyone from the board would like to make it. And I can take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Dustin. I would have guessed you might be too young to be a Hendrix fan, but that was a pretty good Electric Ladyland impression. So do we have any questions for Dustin? Okay, I got two hands. I'll go to Emerson Hasbrook first. Go ahead, Emerson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I do not have a question, but when you're ready, I'll make that motion on behalf of the board.
Great, I appreciate that. I will come back to you. Chris Bat-Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, a question regarding the discrepancy in the GARFO and ACCSP landings, which is always been there. In North Carolina, it's probably one of those states where it shows up the most with just the higher landings. And in fact, we have a lot of state waters landings, to state permitted dealers. Carson, I can't remember if it was in the council briefing information this time around or not, but I think it's been flagged in the past that that I guess the landings reported through GARFO, you don't capture, the full amount. I don't know if that was still there or if that's something that that would maybe help resolve, I guess, the differences in the landings reported in the FMP review versus the briefing materials the council produces for Bluefish specs.
So I didn't cover it in great detail, but the two numbers are in the briefing materials. But one factor when thinking about GARFO landings and discards moving forward is the CAMS process. So I think that through that moving forward, there will be, and I would look to GARFO for confirmation of this, but I think that there will be more looking into those discrepancies with state-only landings.
You good, Chris? Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Carson. Yeah, it has been a long-standing issue with the discrepancies and potential for over-reporting there even as well, if they're coming into both the states and to federal dealers. Okay, so if there's no other questions, I don't see any other hands online. I'll look around the room one more time. Okay, so Emerson, if you're still willing, we need a motion to approve the FMP review and the de minimis states.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If staff can put that up on the screen, I'll read it into the record and make that motion. Move to approve the Bluefish FMP review for the 2021 fishing year, state compliance reports, and de minimis requests from Maine, South Carolina, and Georgia.
Great, thank you, Emerson. And I see a hand. Roy Miller, are you seconding this motion?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Right, thank you. I don't know if we'll have any need for discussions, but I'll look to the maker of the motion and the seconder if they have any interest.
I don't need to add anything more than what the staff presented. Thank you.
All right, sounds good. Well, I don't see any other hands, so I guess we can just call the question here. Is there any objection to this motion? Great. No hands, so motion passes. And is there anything else that you need, Dustin?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Well, great. I appreciate that. I appreciate the time. We'll wrap up here for Bluefish today, and I think we've already discussed what time we're starting tomorrow because I don't have that in front of me, hopefully, unless Mike, you want to take that? Great, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. So the council will be reconvening with the Summer Flounder Scup Black Sea Bass Board tomorrow morning, starting at 9 o'clock. So everyone's off the hook until 9 a.m. See you then.